I overheard my wife tell her boss, "He's too stupid to notice I took his bonus money for myself." The next day, I showed up at her office with receipts, and her boss's face turned pale. "He's too stupid to notice I took his bonus money for myself." That's what I heard my wife, Clarice, say on the phone to her boss while she thought I was asleep. She laughed. So did he. The next day, I walked into her office with every document, every screenshot, every receipt that proved she'd been stealing money from me, and possibly her company. Her boss turned pale. She lost more than just her job that day, and I lost the woman I thought I married. Let me start by saying I'm not the jealous type. I'm not the suspicious husband who checks phone messages or installs spyware on devices. I was raised by a father who believed trust was the bedrock of any real relationship, and I carried that belief through 19 years of marriage. My name's Malcolm Trent. I'm a financial consultant based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. My wife, Clarice, and I met through a friend at a fundraiser nearly 2 decades ago. She was witty, driven, and had this calm confidence that pulled people in. We clicked instantly. I thought we were a team. I really believed that. For most of our marriage, life was predictable, in a good way. We weren't flashy, didn't chase vacations or luxury cars. We built a modest life, focused on our careers, and slowly saving for the future. We'd always talked about eventually renovating the kitchen, traveling to Europe, maybe retiring early if we played our cards right. But things started to shift when Clarice got a job offer from Skycore Solutions, a large tech firm in Minneapolis. She called it her dream role, head of strategic marketing. More money, more responsibility, and a title that came with actual decision-making power. I was proud of her. I remember standing in the kitchen when she got the call. She cried. I hugged her. We toasted with cheap wine. It felt like a win for both of us. The first year at Skycore seemed fine. She worked late often, but she said it came with the job. She traveled more than usual, but again, conferences, client meetings, executive retreats. It was a lifestyle shift, sure, but not a red flag. I kept myself busy with client work, house projects, the occasional weekend getaway with friends. We stayed in our rhythm. Until we didn't. The change wasn't obvious at first. It crept in, quiet, slow. Clarice started pulling away. Conversations were shorter. Affection became rare. Even dinner together became something we did in silence. Our phones or laptops open at the table. I told myself she was just stressed. New job, more pressure, probably just a phase. But then I got my annual bonus in December. $12,000. I was proud of that check. My client work had been strong all year. Clarice and I had talked about using it to finally update our dated kitchen cabinets and get new countertops. We'd even picked out a sample slab of quartz we liked at a local place in Roseville. The money was direct deposited into our joint account. A week later, when I logged in to pay bills, it was gone. I didn't panic. I figured Clarice might have moved it temporarily to our other account or used it to pay off some high-interest debt. Hey, I asked her casually one night as we were brushing our teeth. Did you move the bonus money? She paused for a second, barely noticeable, then said, yeah. I thought we agreed to put it toward the credit cards. I already paid some stuff off. That made sense, kind of. I didn't remember having a concrete plan like that, but we had talked about debt a few weeks earlier. So I let it go. Mistake number 1. January rolled around, and the distance between us stretched further. She started locking her phone, turned it face down at dinner, spent more time in our home office behind closed doors, on Zoom calls. I started feeling something, a knot in my stomach. Not quite suspicion, not quite dread, just the unsettling feeling that something wasn't adding up. Then, one night, it all broke wide open. It was a Thursday, cold outside, snow piled along the driveway like the city had given up clearing it. Clarice thought I was asleep. I had been struggling with insomnia again and had taken to walking the house late at night. I liked the stillness, the quiet. That night, I passed by her office and heard her talking on the phone, her voice low but unmistakably giddy. She was laughing, playfully. It stopped me in my tracks. No, I'm serious, she said, giggling. He's too stupid to notice I took his bonus money for myself. She laughed again. I moved it right out. He didn't say a word. Honestly, I could take more and he'd still think it was for groceries or something. The blood rushed to my ears. I didn't know who she was talking to yet, but I knew enough. I backed away slowly, heart racing, mouth dry, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, after she left for work, I started digging. Not emotionally, not irrationally, but methodically, like a man used to following paper trails for a living. I went through every online bank statement, every credit card transaction. I pulled up emails, checked the routing numbers on transactions. And sure enough, Clarice had opened a separate account at a local credit union. Over $10,500 had been quietly moved into that account across 4 transfers. The transfers were labeled with vague memos like reimbursement, utilities, or family expenses. None of that was true. Then I found the emails. One thread stood out, between Clarice and someone named Eric Dalmore. I didn't recognize the name at first, but when I checked LinkedIn, my stomach dropped. He was her boss. The emails weren't work-related. The tone was familiar, intimate, occasionally graphic. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. My body was ice. I stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to think beyond the betrayal curling around my lungs like smoke. But I didn't confront her that night. I needed more, and I needed a plan. So I spent the rest of the weekend gathering every document, every statement, every piece of digital evidence I could find. I printed everything, organized it chronologically, made copies. On Monday, while Clarice thought I was at work, I drove to Skycore Solutions. The office was in one of those glossy towers off Washington Avenue, sleek and sterile. I walked into the lobby, folder in hand, and asked to speak to Eric Dalmore. The receptionist gave me a look, but buzzed him anyway. When he stepped out, I recognized him immediately from photos. Late 40s, sharp suit, expensive watch. He looked at me with polite confusion. Yes. Are you Eric Dalmore? I asked. Yes. Can I help you? I'm Clarice Trent's husband. His face changed instantly, just a flicker, but it was there. I handed him the folder. You might want to look through these. There's a mix of personal and company-related discrepancies I think you'll want to see. He opened the folder right there in front of me. As he flipped through the pages, his face slowly drained of color. I know what it is, I said. I figured it was better you hear it from me than from legal down the line. I turned and walked out. She came home earlier than usual that evening. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the garage door groan open. The front door creaked, and Clarice stepped inside, keys jingling as she tossed them onto the hallway table. Her heels clicked against the hardwood, each step slower than the last, like she already sensed the shift in the air. Malcolm, she called out, her voice tighter than usual. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to feel it, that quiet, that dread. The space between us now filled with everything I knew and she didn't realize yet. She walked into the living room, saw me sitting there with her laptop, her printed emails, and the file folders spread out neatly on the coffee table. Her eyes flicked down, froze, then locked on mine. Her face went pale. Where did you get that? She asked, barely above a whisper. I could ask the same about the bonus money, I said, calm, almost too calm for how I felt. But I think I already know the answer. Her mouth opened, but she didn't say anything right away. I watched as the weight of it all landed on her shoulders. The money, the lies, the affair. It hit her in real time. She sat down slowly on the edge of the armchair across from me. For a second, I thought she might try to explain it away, come up with some half-baked excuse, some distraction, some attempt to twist the narrative. But she didn't. Instead, she looked down at the floor like a scolded teenager. You went to my office, she finally said. I did. She gave a bitter little exhale, not quite a laugh. You embarrassed me. That was it. That was her concern. Not the betrayal, not the theft, not the crumbling of our marriage, just the embarrassment. I remember that moment clearly. It wasn't just anger I felt, it was grief. Not just for what we'd become, but for who she really was underneath the version I believed in for 19 years. You know what's worse than being embarrassed in front of your coworkers? I asked. Being married to someone who thinks you're too stupid to catch on when they're stealing from you. Silence stretched between us. She didn't apologize. Not really. She said she made mistakes. That things had gotten complicated. That she didn't know how to tell me. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just sat there and listened to a woman unravel her own character in front of me. Every excuse felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I guess I was angry, she said at one point. We've been stuck for a long time. You've been so disconnected. Disconnection isn't a license to lie, Clarice, I said. You could have talked to me. Instead, you took from me. And you talked about me. I stood up, folder in hand. I've already started the paperwork, I said. The bank accounts are frozen. The credit union account will be flagged by morning. I've spoken with a lawyer. You'll be served this week. She didn't argue. Maybe part of her was relieved. Maybe she knew it was over before I did. She slept in the guest room that night, packed a bag the next morning, said she'd go stay with her sister in Bloomington for a while. I didn't ask when, or if, she'd be back. I didn't want to know. A few days later, a friend of mine who works in corporate compliance called me after I'd casually mentioned Skycore in conversation. He said things were getting messy over there. Apparently, internal audits were in full swing. Rumors were spreading fast about a senior staff member misusing travel and client funds, possibly embezzlement. I didn't push for details. I already had a pretty good idea who they were talking about. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It wasn't even the affair. It was the fact that someone I gave my whole life to had talked about me like I was a fool. That she didn't just betray me quietly, but laughed about it with someone else. Someone she admired more than the man who stood by her for nearly 2 decades. Every time I replayed her voice in my head, he's too stupid to notice. It wasn't just painful. It was degrading. I'd been her partner, her emotional support, her safety net, and she turned me into a punchline in someone else's joke. That was the part one couldn't forgive. It's strange how fast a life can shift, how quickly everything that once felt certain can fall apart. like a table with one leg suddenly kicked out from under it. In the days that followed, I started seeing little details differently. Old pictures of us that once made me smile now made me nauseous. Her perfume on the pillow felt like a stain. Even her handwriting on our grocery list felt like a stranger's scrawl. I started cleaning the house obsessively, not out of spite, but like I was trying to erase her presence one drawer at a time. I boxed up her things, packed them neatly, and left them by the garage door. I didn't even tell her. She came by to get them when I wasn't home. We didn't speak. At that point, there wasn't anything left to say. Days turned into weeks. The silence between us grew into something physical, like a dense fog that settled over every corner of the house she'd once filled with her voice. I kept working, kept taking client calls, kept moving like everything was normal. But everything had shifted. You don't just lose a person in a betrayal like this. You lose a version of yourself, too. I started questioning everything. Had she always been this person? Was it me? Had I missed signs for years because I wanted so badly to believe we were solid? I went back through old texts, emails, even photos from the past few years. The cracks had been there, subtle but present. The long silences at family gatherings. The way she'd started talking more about what she deserved, about wanting more than this small life. I'd brushed it off as ambition. I admired that about her, her drive, her hunger for growth. I never imagined it would turn into something so cold. I told a few close friends. Not many. Just the ones I knew wouldn't make it about gossip. Most were stunned. A couple admitted they'd felt something off in recent years but didn't want to interfere. One friend, Naomi, someone I'd known since college, told me point blank, "She looked right through you the last time I saw her." It was like she'd already left the marriage in her head. That one stuck with me. Meanwhile, the legal process churned forward. The divorce filings, the asset disclosures, the endless calls with attorneys. There's no poetry in that part. It's all paperwork and negotiations, polite phrases covering raw wounds. We didn't fight. She didn't contest the filings. Maybe she knew it was over. Maybe she was too tired to pretend anymore. Through all of this, I kept thinking about that moment at Skycore. Eric's face when he opened the folder, the way his eyes darted between the numbers and emails. I never heard directly from him again, but I did hear from a former Skycore employee who reached out through LinkedIn. Said the company let Clarice go quietly a few days after my visit, and that Eric had taken a leave of absence. Skycore didn't want to scene Dow, apparently. They handled it internally. The funny thing is, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no rush of vindication, just exhaustion. People assume revenge is satisfying, that catching someone red-handed and blowing up their life gives you some kind of power. But the truth is, revenge is just a moment. It doesn't rebuild what you lost. It doesn't fill the empty side of the bed. It doesn't rewind the clock to before everything turned rotten. And the worst part? I still missed her. Not the woman who stole from me. Not the woman who mocked me behind my back. But the woman I thought she was. The version of Clarice who used to fall asleep on the couch during Sunday movies. The woman who once left sticky notes on the fridge with jokes or reminders to buy milk. The woman who teared up at my mother's funeral and held my hand so tightly I thought she'd never let go. That version of her? I mourned her like a death. In early March, I got an email from her. No subject line. Just a few lines, typed late at night. "I know you probably hate me. I deserve it. I'm sorry I broke everything. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I was proud of you. Always." I stared at it for a long time. My cursor hovered over reply, then back to delete. I didn't do either. I just closed the tab and went to bed. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried through any of it, honestly. It was like my body wouldn't allow it, like the betrayal was too dry, too sharp for tears. But I did feel something crack open inside me, something soft and tired that had been holding its breath for weeks. The next morning, I started boxing up the rest of her things. Not because I was angry, because I was ready. Some mornings, I'd wake up and forget. That brief, surreal moment where your brain hasn't caught up to your reality. I'd reach across the bed and expect her warmth, a mumble, a sigh. But the sheets were always cold. That's when the memory would hit like a slap. The quiet sound of her voice in the office, calling me too stupid to notice. There's a pain that comes with betrayal that's not loud. It's not screaming, not shattering dishes or dramatic breakdowns. It's quieter, heavier. It seeps into everything. Drinking your coffee alone, walking past a shelf with her old books still lined up neatly, even standing in line at the grocery store when you realize you no longer need to buy almond milk because she was the only one who drank it. I kept working. I had to. My clients didn't care what my personal life looked like. They cared about numbers, about growth, about return on investment. And maybe that was a gift in its own strange way. It gave me structure, deadlines, emails to reply to, charts to analyze. The work didn't ask how I was feeling. It just asked for deliverables. In mid-March, Clarice's sister, Denise, called. We'd never been close. Denise always kept her distance from me, and I couldn't blame her for taking her sister's side. But she was calm on the phone. Careful. "She's not doing great," she said. She hasn't been eating. Barely leaves the house. I stayed silent. I didn't want to ask why Denise was telling me this. I didn't want to guess what she expected from me. I know what she did was horrible, she added. But she's still my sister. And I don't think she's okay. I told her I appreciated the call, and that I truly hoped Clarice found a way through whatever she was dealing with. And I meant that. But I didn't ask to talk to her. I didn't ask for updates. Because here's the thing. When someone steals from you, lies to you, and then uses you as a punchline to build a bond with their affair partner, they're not just hurting you in the moment. They're reshaping your whole narrative. They're changing the way you look at everything that came before. And that's what I couldn't forgive. Not just the affair, not just the money, but the rewriting of our story as if I was just some clueless fool she had to tolerate. It made me doubt myself in ways I didn't expect. I started therapy. Nothing intense, just weekly Zoom sessions with a guy named Dr. Klein. He wasn't the stereotypical soft-spoken, nodding type. He asked blunt questions, made me sit in silence with them until I had to answer. One week, he asked, "Do you believe her version of you?" "What version?" "The one where you're stupid, blind, too passive to notice what was happening." I didn't answer right away, because a part of me had started to. That's the danger of betrayal. You internalize it. You start wondering if maybe you really were easy to fool, too trusting, too focused on your own lane to see the red flags waving right in front of your face. But eventually, I said, "No, I don't believe it. I was loyal. I was consistent. That's not stupid." He nodded. "Good. Because believing their version of you is how they win twice." That stuck with me. Around the same time, I got rid of the bed. It sounds stupid, I know, but I couldn't sleep in it anymore. It held too much. Her scent had faded, but not the memories. I replaced it with a firmer one, something neutral. New sheets. New pillows. I rearranged the furniture in the bedroom. Something about changing the angles helped, like I wasn't waking up in the same life anymore. I also started going out more. Dinner with friends. Casual drinks. Nothing forced. Just slowly relearning how to be in the world as a single man again. It felt strange at first. Restaurants where we used to go. A bench at Como Park where we once sat and planned our future. But after a while, those places became mine again. I didn't date. I wasn't ready. Some friends nudged me. "You need a rebound," they said. But I wasn't interested in using another person to patch a wound I hadn't finished cleaning out yet. Every now and then, someone who didn't know would ask, "How's Clarice?" And I'd pause for half a second before saying, "We're no longer together." Most people didn't pry. Some gave me that quiet nod, like they knew there was more to the story but respected that I wasn't ready to share it. One Saturday in late April, I was clearing out the last of her stuff from the garage. An old box of her college yearbooks, some holiday decorations, a photo album I hadn't seen in years. I opened it, flipped through a few pages. Us in Vermont one fall. A friend's wedding in Wisconsin. A trip to Duluth, smiling over beers near the harbor. For a second, I smiled. Not because I missed her, but because those moments were real. They weren't fake just because she changed. They were still ours in that time. And they mattered. But I closed the album. Put it in the donate pile. It's one thing to remember the good. It's another to carry it forward when it doesn't belong in your future anymore. Summer rolled in slowly that year, and with it, a new rhythm. The sun stayed up longer. The house felt less like a tomb and more like a space I could breathe in again. I planted tomatoes in the backyard, something I talked about for years but never did because Clarice didn't like the smell of soil. I started going to a local book club at a neighborhood coffee shop. Nothing fancy, just a group of people who liked stories like I did. But despite the forward motion, there was one thread still hanging loose. Skycore. About 2 months after Clarice had been fired, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Harold Mitchelson, a former client of mine who had recently taken a leadership role at a business consultancy that partnered with Skycore. Apparently, word had spread internally that Clarice's mishandling of funds and inappropriate relationship with her direct superior had prompted a quiet compliance probe. While they kept the details buried, the fallout had created openings and curiosity. Harold said, "I heard you were the one who blew the whistle." I told him I hadn't planned it that way, but I wasn't about to let myself be exploited and humiliated. He respected that. Then he said something that lit a spark. "We're being brought in to restructure Skycore's financial practices. If you're interested, there may be a consulting opportunity for you." At first, I hesitated. Did I really want to walk into the same place that gutted my life? But then I thought about Clarice, about how she'd mocked me to the man who paid her salary, about how they laughed over what they thought I didn't know, about how she had weaponized my trust and used it to carve out a hidden life. That place enabled her. Not intentionally, maybe, but through neglect, through blindness, through a culture that rewarded charm and ignored ethics. And now they needed someone who knew how to see what others missed. I told Harold I was interested. The process took a few weeks, interviews, background checks, project proposals. But by early summer, I was brought on as an external auditor and financial strategy consultant for a 6-month contract. When I walked into that building on my first official day, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. The The same lobby. The same polished floors. But this time, I wasn't a man holding a folder filled with heartbreak. I was the guy they called when things were broken. Eric Dalmore, her former boss, had resigned quietly under pressure. The leave of absence became permanent. I heard he was working out of state now, trying to rebuild his reputation. There had been no legal action against either of them. Skycore was desperate to avoid Essendal. But internally, the company made sweeping changes. New ethics officers, tighter controls, mandatory reporting procedures for financial handling. Clarice, she'd been blacklisted from the industry. Not officially, but word travels. No firm in marketing or public strategy within a 50-mile radius would touch her. The Minneapolis network was tighter than she realized. A mutual acquaintance told me she'd tried freelance consulting for a while, but it didn't pan out. Too much baggage. Too many people whispering behind her back. By fall, I heard she'd moved back in with her mother in Egan, working part-time at a small retail outlet, nothing related to her old career, trying to figure out what came next. I didn't gloat. I didn't send her a message. But one afternoon in October, I was at a coffee shop near Nicollet Mall with a Skycore colleague when I saw her through the window. Clarice, hair tied back, no makeup, wearing a worn hoodie and jeans. She was walking by slowly, a paper bag in one hand, head down, lost in thought. She didn't see me, and I didn't wave. She passed by and disappeared into the crowd. I realized in that moment, revenge isn't about striking back. It's about reclaiming your power. And I had. Quietly. Thoroughly. With integrity. She once said I was too stupid to notice. Turns out, I was smart enough to rebuild what she tried to destroy, and walk away cleaner than she ever expected. I went back to my coffee and smiled. Not out of spite. Out of peace.